Thanks, Saul. So I'm Jeremy, and I want to tell you a story today about how I found my purpose. And it's a little bit of a quirky and unusual story, but I think it has quite interesting implications for the future of work, of business, and of innovation. So let me tell you a bit about what I do right now, because it's useful context. So I run something called Purpose. And Purpose is the world's first home for movement building. So what we do is we organize people around major global issues, and we try to deploy their collective power using technology in very smart ways around a whole range of things completely transnationally. I'll give you just one example of something that's going on right now. So over the last week, All Out, which is the global gay rights movement that Purpose incubated, has been running a campaign to save a man in Cameroon who was jailed for 3 years for sending a text message to another man that said, "I am very much in love with you." And as you can imagine, people around the world are pretty outraged by this, and it's really a broader problem around the decriminalisation of homosexuality that needs to happen all over sub-Saharan Africa. So we've organised this global campaign of solidarity with Roger to try to prevent his jail sentence from being extended. And more than 100,000 people have taken action just in the last several days. And we got this one amazing photo from this very passionate young girl in solidarity with Roger that says, "I'm very much in love with you." And so, like this young girl, I too was a very passionate child. In fact, most kids who are, who lie awake at night, they're thinking, what am I going to get for Christmas? And when I was about 7, I would lie awake at night and think, what are we going to do about the Cold War? And I was very seriously concerned. And what's more, I had this funny idea, and I'm really not sure where it came from, but I had this funny idea that somehow I could make a difference. I could somehow contribute, that if only I was able to sort of take action, that I could stop the nuclear arms race. And I remember lying awake at night in bed and even having this premonition that I would get to do something. And I held my hand like this in a fist, and that represented my life now. And I thought to myself, soon my life will be like this. It will be open, and I'll be somehow contributing to solving these problems. And so a few months later, my school teacher, my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Scott, shows up in class with a poster for a competition for something called the International Children's Peace Prize. And the winners would get to go to Disneyland, which seemed pretty cool, although frankly I was not the kind of kid who liked toys. And I would get to go to Disneyland, and they would become ambassadors for peace around the world. So this was kind of my dream gig. And so, over a very intense weekend, I prepared my entry for this competition. A few days later, a man comes to the football field where I was playing with my friends and gets out of the car and tells me I'd won the competition. And suddenly my life was about to change. And I'd won the competition by writing a song all about these Cold War anxieties called Rainbow of Peace. The only problem, of course, was that I couldn't sing.
I really was very concerned about world peace. I really wanted to do something. But terrorism in America, Libya, and Russia, Liberia, and everything, I don't like President Reagan as well. Let's join together and we all can sing for peace. I entered the competition because I wanted to have a chance to contribute to world peace. I wrote the song because I thought, well, that's a competition. I want peace very, very much. And if I win the competition, I've got a big chance to try to help make peace.
So, very strange child. So so this sort of launched this whole career, and so I spent the next several years of my life as this kind of roving ambassador for peace and other issues. I'm looking very concerned, as you see. And, I met Nobel Prize winners, I lobbied the Prime Minister, I had a pretty extensive agenda of change. By the year 1990, when I was about 12, I'd become a real pro at this.
Sydney home.
Well, I think we have got problems, and I think we have got monetary problems. What you could do is divert 10% of each nation's annual military spending to services of debt, the environment, and, health, malnutrition, children, and all these problems, because we spend an excessive amount, an enormous amount on the military, which is completely unnecessary to spend so much, and instead we've got to spend that money on immediate problems that endanger our entire society.
I still agree with that, for the record. So as you can imagine, this was a strange childhood to have, and so I'm in my, 10 years later or so, in my early 20s, I have to find my grown-up purpose. So, it's one thing to be a kid who sounds like he's 40, but that doesn't work very well when you're actually a grown-up. And so I need to kind of construct this new identity for myself, which was quite daunting in a way, partly because I had the burden of the expectations of my childhood. Almost anything I was going to do was going to be a disappointment. And so I had this challenge of trying to construct a new identity. And the thing was, my values and my politics hadn't changed, and I still wanted to work on these big global issues. That's what still kept me really passionate. So I tried a series of ill-fitting suits on in that next period. And I went through this period of saying, okay, I want to work on these issues. I still want to have this kind of purposeful life. How do I do that? So I'll just run you through very quickly the journey of that. I had what might call initially in my early 20s the institutional phase, which was, you can tell from that earlier video that, I sounded a little bit like I was running for elected office. That I thought, well, the obvious thing to do will be to kind of join those institutions, to go, perhaps to become a politician, perhaps to become a diplomat or an official at the UN. And I sort of went to the UN and worked there for a little bit. And, it was really interesting. I loved the spirit of internationalism about the place. Every day I would walk up, 42nd Street and First Avenue, and I would see this row of flags and this sense of solidarity and this sense of everybody just being together, regardless of where they were from, to solve these common global problems was very inspiring. The problem, of course, is once I got inside the building, it was a much less inspiring place, frankly. And, the bureaucratic inertia, the risk aversion, and frankly, the lack of effectiveness of the institution was very disheartening. Now, I think actually in many ways, people need to be in those institutions. They need to be patient people. And I just wasn't one of those people. For better or worse, I figured out that I wasn't particularly patient. So, believe it or not, next I actually I thought, the inefficiencies of the UN and of the non-profit sector, maybe I should join the cult of efficiency. So I had a short stint at McKinsey & Company, the management consultants. Now, actually, there was a huge amount of value in that toolkit. And the way McKinsey brings together people of very different backgrounds is very compelling. Of course, the problem for me was my identity was so bound up with contributing to these issues that, one day I might be doing an amazing pro bono project, but the next day I might have to be helping a coal company become more profitable and contribute to problems like climate change. So I couldn't do work that wasn't, really closely aligned with the values and the politics that I had. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go and I'll join academia. I thought we actually do need to reform these institutions, the UN and others. So I actually went and I won a scholarship. I went to Oxford and I did the beginnings of what was going to be a PhD on reforming those old broken institutions. And that also proved that I was a little bit antsy. I lived in this 14th century house, which was very charming, and we studied the causes of the First World War. But ultimately, for me, I kept being drawn to the world of action. And the world of kind of quiet reflection it didn't suit me very well. And so what actually drew me out of Oxford was it was 2004, and the US presidential campaigns were unfolding, and I was very passionate about the war in Iraq. And so I went back to the US and I got together with some friends and we started an anti-war campaign that focused on using women like Brooke Campbell here, whose brother was killed in Iraq, as spokespeople for what had gone wrong with that war. And the process of doing it, that entrepreneurial process of showing up with nothing, with no money, with just a few ideas and kind of engaging people, was to me incredibly energizing. And I realized that ultimately that entrepreneurialism was what really got me excited. It was really a return to the work that I was doing as a kid. You know, we'd run a fax campaign when I was a kid in 1991 to try to stop the first Gulf War. And we'd inundated James Baker and Tariq Aziz, who were meeting on the eve of the first Gulf War, with faxes. And the really cool thing was that in this bold new world that I inhabited, we could use the internet to scale this kind of movement building in a dramatically different way. And so over the next several years, I started and co-founded a bunch of these organizations that use technology to mobilize people. This is Get Up, a group in Australia that used technology and now has more members than all of Australia's political parties combined. And I co-founded this group, Avaz, which is a global online political movement that now has 16 million members around the world and takes action on all of these issues, using these kind of bottom-up approaches. So in 2009, it had been a busy few years. In 2009, I decided to start Purpose. And having seen the power of these bottom-up entrepreneurial solutions, these participatory approaches, and having been part of these very small, lean groups that had done amazing things with very little money and none of that bully pulpit of a place like the UN, I wanted to create a home for that, for other people who were like me. And for people like me who didn't quite fit any of these other sectoral categories, who weren't just UN people or just private sector people, but who wanted to live in this interstitial space. And we started Purpose as a business with a non-profit affiliate, in part because we wanted to show that you could scale something that really combined economic and social value, rather than just have these businesses that do a little bit of philanthropy on the side as a sort of side project. And so when we started Purpose, the exciting discovery was that there were actually a lot of other people like me. People who 10 or 15 years ago might have dreamed of going to work for Goldman Sachs, but who today, and I think this is very true of young people today, who don't understand why this idea of business and some of the efficiencies of business and some of the innovation and scale of business can't be put together integrally with the process of social change. And we found that there were lots of people like this who were looking in this space. And so I want to share with you very briefly the things we look for in people. We get thousands of applications now. The things we look for in people that we bring on at Purpose, because I think they represent some of the defining qualities of a new kind of person and a new kind of worker, and ultimately potentially a new kind of business. We ask this question to every applicant. What do you think the 3 most important issues in the world are right now? And we don't ask them what their personal pet issues are. We ask them to take a kind of more neutral view of where the biggest strategic challenges in the world are. And what this does is it allows us to see people who actually are substantive about the world around them, who can say more than just motherhood statements about those global issues. We also look for people who can become these movement entrepreneurs, people who can start these new social movements. And really what Purpose has become is a kind of home for these crazy people who've been doing amazing things. This is Alessandra from Brazil. Alessandra joined us when she was still in college. And at the age of 22, as part of her work at Purpose, she went back, raised $1 million, and started a new civic participation movement for the people of Rio using open source tech tools called Minha Rio, which is one of our big projects. This is Andre, who co-founded All Out. This is Matt, who started a new initiative we have to stop the corrupting influence of money in politics by building a long-term reform movement with people like Lawrence Lessig. We also look for people who are cross-sectoral and cross-disciplinary. We like to say that the people who work at Purpose can speak the language of an Occupy activist and of a corporate CMO. And this ability to speak these languages and to actually bridge those things is very important. This is Lee Shawn, whose job title changes daily. This is Tim, who left life as an advisor to the Prime Minister and an economist to make a different kind of change that wasn't based on the inside play. This is Heather, who is at NASA and worked in hedge funds, but wanted to apply her incredible skills to a very different context. We also look for people who are internationalists. This is Galit. Galit went to university in France, she was born in Mexico, and she's Israeli. And people like this who actually think in this seamless global way, I think are very important people to the future of work. Purpose is not alone by any stretch. There are a number of organizations that are emerging, companies that are merging very coherent social missions and social value with real viable businesses, and who are combining these kinds of hybrid people. And so I would encourage those of you out there to think about joining those kinds of organizations or starting them. And most importantly, even your existing organizations, I think, can incorporate some of these key principles. And so I would ask you these 4 questions. How can you and your organization become more purposeful, more entrepreneurial, more hybrid, and more transnational in the way you think? Because I think that that's where the world is headed. And so I'd encourage you to think about ways in which you could start to incorporate those things as well. Thanks very much.